Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to another Coaching and Flourish episode. I'm your host, John, joined here with Britt. Hello, wonderful human beings. Here we go again. How are you doing, Britt?
Good, good. It's been a good day so far. How are you?
Good. Yeah, it's good to be back in these, doing these casts, and I got a new microphone stand, which I'm really excited about. So same mic, but just new stand, and it makes everything feel new. So here we
Always a
are.
good feeling.
All right, let's jump in. So what do we have? What do you have on deck today?
Yeah, so a couple of things have been coming up a lot with folks. So there's kind of a couple of bodies of questions that seem, related. So the first that's coming up is, if you're starting out your coaching program, we obviously ask coaches to, get a practice client or two. We recommend two, right? And so the big question that comes up a lot is, what are some tips for asking for a practice client, making the ask? And then also, like, are there other natural ways that you could go about attracting people to the idea of being a practice client?
Right. So I love this. And these are a couple of things that we're also doing that we're planning on implementing very, very soon. I think the best way to get a practice client is to ask the people closest to you to be practice clients for other coaches. And it's best not to coach, ask, your friends, family, things like that. It's just not best practice to try to coach them. I've listened to a lot of recordings of coaches coaching friends, and instantly that they're coaching their friend. And it's okay. It's not terrible, but I just think it's best practice to ask the people closest in your life who trust you, who know that you're taking a coach training program. And it's a much easier ask just to say, hey, can you be a practice client for someone else? And then you go to your coaching colleagues, your other coaches in your coaching class, and you can say, I have 3 coaches or I have 3 clients. Does anyone need a practice client? And then that gets the ball rolling for other people, because it's much easier to invite someone to be a practice client who you're close with to work with someone else.
Mm.
That's a much easier, smoother ask. That's what I would recommend. And all right, so that's one avenue. That gets the ball rolling. And if I were starting my coaching practice out from zero, the thing that I would do first would network. I would find the spaces where my my target audience, where they hang out, where they go to the gym, where they get their hair cut, wherever you fill in the blank, and that's where I would focus on, and I would focus on getting paying clients, and then if price ever comes up or becomes an issue, then you can offer to be a practice client, and that would be my strategy if it were me in this situation. Um, yeah, those are the 2 paths, and then we also have some projects where Coach Training EDU is going to supply people with practice clients, but I don't want to talk too much about those yet. They are still in the works.
Exciting though. So
It's
what
good
are
stuff.
some of the things that you feel like a new coach that's still in training, just
Mm-hmm.
started a training program, so they're not even really coach trained completely yet, they just maybe have a couple classes under the belt? What are some of the things that they should communicate then to a practice client, or to even a paying client if that's the avenue they choose, so that everything's kind of on the up and up? What are some of the things that they need to communicate, and then what are some like tips and should be's, like, even if this isn't necessary, here's some extra tips to let your practice client know?
Yeah, I think, well, 2 things. One, your practice client has to know that you're in a training program. Like, you can't say, "Hey, I'm a professional coach, but I'm still only in week 2 or 3 of this training." You can't do that. You just have to say, "Yeah, I'm still in a training program, but we need to get practice clients." That's one thing. So that's probably step 1. 2, it's really useful to make it clear that you're still providing value as a coach. That it's not the practice client who's doing you a favor. Like, you don't that energy is really hard to coach with. People will come and I've listened to recordings like this, and the practice clients will say, "Oh, like, am I doing it right? Is this what you need? Like, am I being, how I'm helping you here? Like, is this like uh, that's too that energy is hard to work with as a coach. You want it to go the other way, where someone is paying you money because they show up better. Your client shows up wanting to get their money's worth out of the session. That's that's a, like the better perspective. So in an ironic twist, the it's actually easier to coach paying clients than it is to coach practice clients. But here we are. You have to go get the practice clients first because
Right.
that's just how this works, at least for a little bit. But I really do think you're going after paying clients about 2 months, 3 months into the 6 month program is pretty reasonable. Until then, I would not work your way to practice clients.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know I tried with practice clients first, and they did exactly what you just said. You know, is this okay? Am I being a good client? And I'm like, oh, just answer the question. So I totally understand what you mean. And that
Especially if
actually
they're your
brings me to
friends
another.
too.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Especially if they're your friends, they'll say that even
Yeah,
more.
they were friends of friends. I didn't know them very
There you go.
well, but they probably didn't want to disappoint my friend, right? Um, this also begs the question. So, um, I get this question a lot in class. So we obviously teach a new skill every single week for 24 weeks. New skill, new skill, new skill. And we encourage our coaches to practice those skills then with their clients. And so it comes up sometimes in class, well, what if I want to try a tool or I know I need to practice a tool because I didn't quite grasp it and I want to do it with a client? Can I? And if I can, how should I approach my client saying that I want to use a particular tool?
I mean, transparency is always the best part of this. Um, you can also ask your classmates to be practice clients for specific things like this. So, if it really truly is about you trying the tool because for your benefit, for your skill set, I think it's best to you ask one of your colleagues or ask someone who's going through the training with you, or someone who's maybe already a training coach, or a friend, like a true practice client. Let me try this. If you're in a session and you're getting paid and you think this tool might be the most useful tool for my client, but I'm not sure I have it down 100%, and you choose to use it, I think that's still worthy of being paid. Most of the coaches that I listen to and have heard overviews from, there is a lot of value even in not the best coaching. Like, even if your coaching is, like, from a coaching standpoint, meh, listening empathetically, asking curious questions, giving a person space to process still provides tremendous value. And just being in that space, I think, literally is half the value. The other half you learn from the training and from some of the skills and tools that are there, so you can go in even with more confidence. But really, truly, like, even just showing up is half the value.
Yeah. I think I love what you said too about the overviews, um, because that's another great place to, give and get value from. And you learn from how you coach that particular person. So now you can go back to that particular person and make adjustments with how you're approaching them. And so then that begs the next question that comes up a lot in classes, which is, okay, so I'm getting ready to submit my overview. But I know I want some feedback on a couple of areas that I got stuck, but I don't want to fail my overview. So what do I do about submitting this and getting feedback while also balancing making sure that I'm not, failing, which is something that we
Right.
say very lightly here.
I mean, I think, yeah, I'm not really a fan of a traditional grading system when it comes to learning how to coach. I think it goes contrary to a lot of what I find and cherish in the coaching model, which is really about empowerment. It's an empowerment basis, and it's about gaining the skill sets, and it's about becoming a much better coach. And I know the assessment process, it helps people reach that standard so that they know, okay, I've reached a standard that you can proceed with confidence. And it's really designed to help people become better coaches.
Mm.
Uh, and so from a pure learning standpoint, I would encourage the coach to take the clips and listen to those clips with your trainer and go that direction. I loved it when I was a trainer and certain students would bring clips of themselves coaching to the class and say, I have a clip. It's 5 minutes. Can we listen to it? And those are some of the most amazing learnings out of those kind of experiences. So that's what I would do. If I were the coach, I would bring those to your class, bring those to your group mentor coaching, just bring those to, anyone, anyone who you can. Now for the assessor, that might be the one exception. Like, maybe not bring it to the assessor. If life happens, you need to pass, and this is your recording. Do you need to tell the assessor, hey, these are all the areas where I think I did really poorly, but I hope I still pass. I don't know. Maybe a more pragmatic viewpoint would be better, to pass the scale. But then, from a growth mindset standpoint, I think a lot of coaches are harder judges on themselves than they need to be. And from a growth mindset standpoint, there really is no limit on, the number of assessments you can take or use, and you only need to pass one out of 3 or 4. So we need to do all of them, but you only need to pass once. I would bring it to the assessor. Let the assessor look at it and see what they do. I think the learning that people will get from getting feedback is way more valuable than passing the assessment. And when students get into that perspective, ironically, they pass the assessment. So it's almost like that, those who don't want, it's almost like those who don't want it will receive it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is what I tell folks when I'm training is when I was going through mine, I really value feedback. It's something that I really thrive on. And so I did take it to my assessor and I would say, I rated myself here poorly, but I'm hoping we can listen to it together because I really got stuck and I really didn't know what to do. And I'd love to get your feedback on what I should have done differently. And sometimes, I had great assessors, and sometimes it was like, oh, Britt, I think you're being a little too hard on yourself. Like, this actually wasn't as bad as I would give myself a 2, and they were like, this is probably more like a 5 or a 6, So that was great feedback. But it was also nice to be able to, like, for me, I love the approach of our overviews, our learning tools. And so when you get feedback, if everything you submit is perfect, you're never going to know what areas you can grow and learn and develop in. So I really value the fact that, okay, I can go to my assessor or my trainer and say, hey, like, this is an area I got stuck. What should I have done differently, or what could I have done differently here? I'm still like racking my brain and I don't know. And it was really nice to get feedback then right there, real time, right after listening to it. And then I was able to take that and apply it to my next session and then bring an even better recording to my next overview, which I was then able to pass, right? So I understood that you only have to pass one, so I might as well get as much learning as I possibly can out of the others so that I can submit my last one as like an, let's blow my assessor out of the water type session, so that I'm feeling like I learned a lot and grew a lot throughout the process.
Yeah, totally. I agree 100%. I remember doing my assessing overviews, like the recordings for them. And it always felt like it was extra hard because I had the extra pressure knowing that this was being recorded and I was being assessed for it. And that pressure and feeling. And I was hoping my client would say good things and I would still catch things. And I had to get to a certain point in my own coaching development to feel confident in my ability to deliver an amazing coaching session and not care if it passed or not. When I was making or doing coaching sessions for the MCC, which is a ridiculous level, I feel like associate level is fairly easy to pass with basic coach training, which is what it's designed for. The professional is still fairly easy to pass if you've been trained for it. But the master level, I feel like they go the other way, and it's almost like, okay, you need to account for every single sigh, every pause, every syllable you utter, do not utter, explain why, and I mean it's intense. And I submitted 2 recordings. One did not pass. One passed. One did not. And it is what I expected, but I was hoping that they both would pass.
Mm-hmm.
So then you get another try. And I remember doing my other try, my third try. Really, I mean, I remember where I even was sitting. I mean, that's how intense the session was. And my client was going for it. I mean, he was in it. And I remember feeling like, you know that one scene in Spider-Man where he's holding the 2 trains together and he's like just feeling like he's holding the whole thing. I felt like that was like I was holding the space of the call, and I was barely hanging on, where I realized, wow, like I'm holding some pretty intense space here, but I felt capable. I felt up to the task. And in that moment, I felt this, I don't know, epiphany. It just felt like I knew that this coaching was changing this person's life without a doubt. Like this conversation, it's at that level where it's an honor to even have this conversation with someone, hold space, be confident with it. That at this point, it wasn't a perfect recording. There were things I know that weren't MCC standard, but at that point, I didn't care. I knew that the coaching was awesome enough that I just felt proud of it, just as is enough. This is a good. And the question then is, well, I know there's some parts that I would change, but do I send it? And I decided I'm just going to send it. It's at this point, I send. And when coaches get to that point, when you get to a point where you know, yes, like this conversation is changing this person's life, send. Send. That's what that would be my advice on overviews. Find that place.
I love that advice, and it reminds me of, the advice I always give in all my classes is, I know this sounds crazy, but really like the most basic thing that you have to get into to be an effective coach is just to lean into your curiosity. And not your curiosity for your sake, but your curiosity for your client's sake. And once you get into that space, mistakes might still happen, but it won't matter. You'll know that you're actually coaching and like you just said, like changing this person's life or making this, giving them the insights and the tools that they need to change their lives. And I feel like I don't remember exactly as vibrantly as you do when that happened for me, when that shift happened for me in my coaching. But I know for a while I was very much leaning on like, okay, I have my list of questions in front of me and I'm, viciously writing down notes of everything that their person's saying so I don't forget anything. And I was just so caught up in doing it right. And once I finally was able to let go of like, I have to do this right, I have to ask the perfect question, I have to get this insight. And I was just able to say, like, you know what am I most curious about what they just said? And I just asked myself that question after every time, now I do it subconsciously, but like that's essentially what I'm asking myself every time I ask a new question, leaning into that curiosity. And it's just fundamentally changed the way that I coach. I've been able to lean into a more authentic version of my coaching where it's more creative and it's more fun. And so I think that's great advice. And then the more pragmatic advice too, that you sort of alluded to earlier, which I also give out in classes is, get used to just recording everything. Because when you're recording, when you know that you're making a recording for an overview, that pressure's there and it changes the way that you coach. So consider just asking your practice clients to record everything. And if you decide you're not going to use it, you can let them know, hey, I'm going to delete this one, but that way there's not that pressure anymore. You have several to choose from to send. Because I know my first 1.0, I was just recording the ones I knew I needed to send. And oh, the first couple were brutal because of that pressure. So I think those are some great pieces of advice too.
Mm.
So that does bring us to the last question, or maybe we would bridge this into next week's a little bit too. So now we kind of talked about like the getting started part of the coaching, but the other big question that's come up for me a lot in my classes lately is, okay, we're done now. I finished my coach training. I'm ready to start my business. Um, but I'm struggling with how to communicate like what I want to do. So this came up a few times recently, but basically what it boils down to is like, how do I create, or what are some tips for putting together an effective mission or vision statement that attracts not just any client, but the type of client I'm trying to work with? And maybe there's other steps before mission and vision that need to happen, but
Right. Yeah, it's funny. This came up earlier today as well. And to simplify it, I think that there are three things that a coach needs. Uh, the first is a defined specific audience who they want to work with. And this is more challenging than I think it seems. Most new coaches, when they look at picking a specific audience, feel like they're excluding 95% of all the other people who could be potential clients, and that feels scary. And really, truly, you can only maybe work with 40 to 50 clients at any one time. I mean, at my height, I was working with 40 some clients, and it was a lot. Um, and the the challenge of that from like a pure logistics standpoint is enough. So you're only really could like as a coach, like get in your mind, I'm only working with 40 people. So what specific target audience has more than 40 people in it? Like you start thinking that way, then it's almost like everything opens up. And the benefit of having a specific target audience is then you can tell other people, these are the kind of people I coach. So it improves your networking appeal. It's
mm,
very hard to network if you are saying, I coach anyone, anything, and let's network that. That's not going to work. So it and networking is for me is the primary vehicle. It's what I would use if I were starting out. It's what I used like about halfway through and figured out how this marketing thing really works. Networking is the way to go. So specific audience is one. Two, the pain points of that audience. And
mm,
if you get the pain points down, then you get people's attention if you're talking about it. Sharpens your marketing, even the way that you're pitching your ideas to people. And uh, so let's say you're networking and you're telling people, this is my target audience. Um, you could say, these are the things I work with people on. These are the three pain points. And they can either refer you directly and do practice sessions that way. You know, you can do workshops for them, small presentations, put together some, quick, orientation to coaching course. I mean, there's a lot that you can do if you have those two pieces. Usually that's enough for coaches to get started and to attract paying clients. Um, the third one is also a larger idea of the larger vision and mission of what you want to accomplish. And if you can add that and ask yourself from a more universal perspective, let's say that your coaching practice was replicated ad infinitum, like where you could have, let's say you work with, executives who are wanting to have like the perfect work life integration
mm,
and make a positive difference in the world, right? Like that's your, that's your target audience. And then you could, from like a larger standpoint, uh, it's like brainstorming, except it's like edge mapping. Like if you were to take that to
mm,
the edges, and let's say every single executive who was striving to make a positive difference in the world, were working with a coach. What would that do to the world?
mm,
Uh, what if people coached barbers and hairstylists, and I mean, imagine if every barber and hairstylist were working with a coach. Imagine how, like, the amazing questions that they would ask their people in chairs. What would that do to society?
Hmm.
So you have to edge map it. You have to go to the edges of what's the small thing I'm doing here. If it were replicated, for me, it was working with teachers, working with students. What if every teacher had basic coach training? What if teachers were trained to listen actively, empathy, with curiosity, without judgment, just for periods of time? How would that change the face of education in the world? And that is an um, empathetic mission that helps when things get hard. It helps when a client asks for a refund, or that something comes up in their life they can't continue the coaching, or you're looking at your monthly statement thinking, okay, like, I got to get 2 clients the next 2 weeks. I've been there. I've done that. It's not fun. We were month to month for 2 years living on coaching alone. 2 years looking at, I need to get clients. I need to get some new clients right now. I know this is not a very attractive, like, hey, you want to be a coach? Guess what? Can you go through 2 years of month-to-month financial stress and hardship and all those kinds of things where you have, like, we literally had lawn furniture as our kitchen table for a period of time. So I've been there. I know it. Having that empathetic mission helps you get through those hard things, because I just knew it. I knew I was doing good in the world. I knew the fundamentals were on point. And it really was a matter of figuring out how to network. Then it just tipped. It was like someone just turned on the light or the faucet, and the referrals started pouring in. It really is a hustle. I felt like, to get to 5 clients, 10 clients, 15. But once I got to 15, the referral engine kicked up. And the nice thing about referrals is, because they were referred to you, they're more likely to also refer you.
Right.
And that was surprising to me, pleasantly surprising. So, and then if you want to tell parents, if you want to get a full practice with people, tell people you have a waiting list. Oh my goodness. You tell parents, they hear words waiting list. It's like, okay, I need to instantly sign up. Like, how do I get my child onto the waiting list, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it just started going to the point where I would do an initial interview with students, and it really was a true initial interview where we were both deciding if this would work for each other, or I'd just refer them to another coach. But yeah, that's my advice to new coaches starting out. Answer the question, like, to each of those 3 things. Like, do you have a specific audience? Have you identified their 3 biggest, or 3 pain points? And then, do you have a larger scope, larger vision, mission that encapsulates those other 2?
I
If you
love those
answer
ingredients.
yes, yeah, if you answer yes to all 3, you're probably good to go. If you answer yes to 2 out of 3, you're probably 67% likely to make it. 1 out of 3, 33% chance of getting a practice.
Right. Right. That's great. I think those are. I love that, the steps. Like, one of the things that I always talk about in classes when people ask me this is, like, actually craft your ideal client. Like, give them a face, a name. Like, what is it that they embody that you can make a difference in them? And a lot of stuff ultimately then flows from there. Like what you were just saying, this is my ideal client. And if this like client shows up, I expect that they're going to talk about this, this, and this, these 3 pain points. And what I want to do with this client is XYZ. Well, that can turn into a mission, or that can turn into a vision. So a lot of it really does start with identifying that target audience, which, you're right, is where coaches often struggle, because they feel like, well, if I'm, focusing too closely. I always tell the bus story. I want to say that either you taught me this, John, or I was in my class, but the bus story I loved, which is, if you're sitting on a bus, I used to ride a bus when I worked in the city, and you're sitting next to someone, they say, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a coach. Oh, that's really cool. What kind of coaching do you do? Oh, I help people with, solve general problems with their life. And, if they have any issues, I help them work through them. Everybody's going to go, oh, huh, that's pretty cool. And they're never going to see themselves as the person, and they're never really going to think of anyone else. But if I sat down next to if someone sits down next to me in the bus, and I say, oh, I'm a writing coach, and my job, like, specifically what I do is I help new writers find their voice and put that voice on paper so that they can finally share the stories in their head with the world, everybody's going to think of at least one person they know who has a book or wants to write something, and they're going to potentially refer that person to me. So you automatically put a face in someone's head when you're more specific. So I don't remember if it was you, John, or if it was one of the coaches who told me that story, but I use it all the time in my classes, and I think it makes a really big impact.
Yeah, it was not me, but I love it. That's cool. I mean, it's exactly it. I mean, even when you're describing that story, yeah, like I'm thinking of people in my mind. Everyone listening is thought of someone. When you were saying that story, everyone listening thought of somebody. You know it's true, and that's the power of a specialty. It really is.
Right.
And then you can make it big, on a mission for people to find their voice.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And imagine if that happened. Like, what are the principles? What are you finding? What are you learning working with this target audience? I mean, these are all. This to me is the exciting field of coaching. This is why I love this field. Is that I feel like it has so much to offer humanity and so much to gain. Like, as human beings, it's a privilege and an honor to work in this field, and it is work. It's sometimes I'm very heavy lifting, but it's totally worth it and it's incredibly fulfilling. And here we are. Thanks, everyone. Another Coaching on Flourish podcast. Thank you, Britt. Thank you for all those listening. We'll see you next week.